Hello everybody and welcome to this edition of What's New in Tennis. This week we're going to be talking about the controversial subject of wildcards. Maria Sharapova has this week returned to tennis after a 15-month suspension, and she's playing in the Porsche Grand Prix in Stuttgart. This is only possible because she's been given a wild card, and some of the other players playing in the tour are very unhappy about that. But basically, this has also raised a very interesting issue about whether she'll be offered a wild card for the Wimbledon Championships. Now, she's still got time to qualify to get her ranking up high enough to actually get direct entry into Wimbledon without a wild card. But if she doesn't succeed in that, then the Wimbledon committee must decide whether or not to invite her. Now, the way wildcards work is that they are given by the Wimbledon committee mainly to British players to bolster the home interest in the tournament, but also to past players who've made a great contribution to the Wimbledon Championships, and that clearly includes champions such as Maria. Maria was the Wimbledon champion in 2004 and also a finalist in 2011. She then played in the Olympic final on the centre court at Wimbledon in 2012, where she lost to Serena Williams in the London Olympics. So she's got a great Wimbledon pedigree, and if she was returning from injury rather than a drugs ban, then she'd clearly be offered a wild card. When the Wimbledon committee makes its decision about Maria's wild card, they'll be taking into account the fact that she's done her time for her offence. So she's done what was asked of her. She's now entirely entitled to be back on the WTA tour. But on the other hand, they'll want to send the right signal about how seriously the sport takes the issue of drug taking. And so they have a very difficult and challenging decision to make. They'll want to be fair to Maria, but they'll also want to protect the integrity of the game. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. When you're talking about wild cards for Wimbledon, the memory is inevitably brought back to 2001, when Goran Ivanisevic was given a wild card into the men's singles at Wimbledon, and he won the tournament, which was quite extraordinary. The first time a wild card has ever won a Grand Slam tournament. He'd been injured for some time, and his ranking had dropped to 125 in the world when Wimbledon came around. He wouldn't have made it into the tournament on his ranking, but because he'd been a three-time finalist, he was given a wild card. And most recently, 3 years before that, he'd been in the final against Pete Sampras, which had gone all the way to 8-6 in the fifth set. So it's tremendously close, and he had always said that his big dream was to win Wimbledon, and for many people this was his last chance. He got in the tournament through the wild card, and then he proceeded to rattle his way through the draw, serving superbly. He beat a couple of players in the early rounds and came up against Andy Roddick, who was quite young then, in the third round, beat him. He then played Marat Safin, beat him, and he eventually came up against Tim Henman in the semi-finals. Henman had just beaten Roger Federer, and Roger Federer before that had beaten Pete Sampras. So along comes Goran Ivanisevic with his wild card, and he's up against Tim Henman, and he's getting a right thrashing from Tim when rain stops play on the Friday afternoon. Tim had just won 8 out of 9 games and was leading 2-1 in the fourth set, and was only a few minutes from victory when the rain came down. They came back the next day, and Goran won the fourth set to level the match. And then it rained again, and they had to wait until Sunday to play the fifth set, which Goran won. So Tim was gutted and in fact never reached a Wimbledon final. Goran got through to his fourth final, and they played that on the Monday against Pat Rafter. It's People's Monday. Everyone paid on the door. I think it was £10 a ticket to see the Wimbledon final. 13,000 turned up, and Goran won an emotional 5-setter to take the Wimbledon title. So it was a fairy tale, a wild card win at Wimbledon. And it had an interesting postscript too, because Goran was actually injured the next 2 years and couldn't come back to defend his title. But in 2004, he got into the tournament on a protected ranking. He won his first round match on the centre court. That was against Mikhail Yuzhny, and then he eventually got to the third round where he lost to former world number 1 Leighton Hewitt, and that was his very last Wimbledon. He retired immediately afterwards, but he was so happy that he'd been able to come back and as a defending champion. And that's the end of a wonderful wildcard story. So that's all from What's New in Tennis this week. Cheerio!